Hello and welcome everyone to the 56th episode of Everyday Eternal. Joining me tonight is actually none of our regular hosts. Neither Matt, Eric or Bob were available for various reasons. You guys probably know that Matt is like a military badass and he had to go on an extraction mission tonight, a tooth extraction mission of that kind. So he couldn't make it. And as you guys know, Eric is also trying to make his way back into the United States. I don't know how far he has gotten, but currently, right now, he's probably going to be on a hiatus until like June or July, until he's finally made his way back to Oregon. And Bob, well, everything we know about Bob is that he has to hide from the law right now, something about his involvement in the 2008 financial crisis. So he might be back next week, who knows. But joining me tonight are two of, I want to say, Legacy's premier content creators right now, Max Gilmore.
Hi.
And Minhajul Hoq.
Hello.
Hey guys, how's it going?
It's going great. Thanks, Julian.
Yeah, thank you for inviting us.
Guys, what time is it actually for you right now?
It's a little after 10 a.m. for me.
And it's a little after 1 p.m. for me.
So, Max, you're hailing from the West Coast, right?
Yeah, I'm in California.
And when you're somewhere on the East Coast?
Close to the East Coast, in between the East Coast and the Midwest. I'm from Ohio.
It's always super interesting how we actually manage to work out the time zones. It's even harder when Eric is on the cast because right now he's still somewhere in East Asia, which makes it quite hard. But thank you so much for taking the time. And for those people who don't know you or don't know you yet, I think most people who are somewhat enfranchised in the Legacy community know who you are. But Max, why don't you tell us something about yourself? Where are you originally from? What are you doing? And what's your thing in Legacy? Which case?
Cool.
Okay, that's actually pretty... let me cut that. It was a pretty stupid question.
Max 101. I can do that.
Yeah. So Max, for those people who don't know you yet, I think most enfranchised players would probably know you very well already. But for those who are new to the cast or to the format, can you tell us something about yourself, who you are?
Sure. So my name is Max Gilmore. I'm a 30-year-old mechanical engineer. I was born and raised in Southern California, where I live also now. I went to school in New York, which I also really enjoyed. But Magic history, I played Magic as a kid, very casually, as many of us did. I got back into Magic during college. I played competitive StarCraft 2, and one of my teammates was a Magic player. And so one night I asked what he was doing, and he said, I'm going to go to a Magic draft. And I said, that game, I love that game. Let's do it. And that was, I believe, a pre-release for Innistrad. And after that, the rest was history. I opened a Snapcaster Mage, got my love of blue. And
actually, I have to stop you right there.
Yeah.
You said you played competitive StarCraft, because that's something I did as well. I played mostly Brood War, but I also played quite a lot of StarCraft 2, actually. Did you also play Brood War, or was StarCraft your first avenue into competitive RTS games?
I was a casual Brood War player, but StarCraft 2 was the first time I played competitively, like Masters level, not quite.
Let me guess your race. You strike me, I don't know why, but you strike me as a Terran player.
I was Protoss.
Oh, okay. Fellow brother, and I love Protoss. I think I was actually maybe better with Terran, but Protoss, that's my thing. So awesome. Really happy to hear that.
Yeah. So following from that, I started playing Magic with a group of college friends in New York, and then when I moved back to California, I found a local game store that I was right near my house. I really enjoyed. I met some great people, like one of the original Everyday Eternal cast members, Jacob Corey. Quickly became friends with him. Yeah, quickly became friends with him, and I was really into Standard at one point. I owned a Unity playset of everything in Standard, and he was looking at my collection and said, Max, you've got a Legacy deck sitting here. And I was like, no way. And he was like, yeah, look at this. So we tallied up some values. We went to a big, I guess, kind of like a trade, like a bazaar for Magic called Frankensons in Southern California, City of Industry. And I went in there with my Standard collection and walked out with a Legacy deck. I walked out with Blue, White, Red Delver.
Wizards probably hates Corey for doing that kind of stuff, like getting that super enfranchised standard player and be like, hey, you know what? Just like trade those cards away. I've got something more exciting for you. Come over. We got some legacy over here.
Yeah. So that was in 2012, and the rest is history. I've just been playing a ton of various decks since then. I've expanded into pretty much everything fair and blue. A little bit of combo. I had a baby born a year and a half ago, and my time kind of went down a lot, and so I started casting Chalices of the Void, because that's
what you do when you have a baby.
Exactly.
Maybe that's what it's gonna take Anorak to start embracing the Chalice.
Exactly. So anyway, that's my history there. As far as achievements, I don't have any huge top 8 finishes. However, if I 5-0 drop the next Legacy Grand Prix, I will have the 5th highest win rate of all time in Legacy.
Really?
Yeah.
Let me guess. Thomas Ingebrigtsen is in first?
He is. I know
you strike me as somebody who would know that. Yeah, that's why I asked.
Yeah. Vidi's in 5th, Vidianto Wijaya, who's a friend of mine as well. And if I 5-0 drop the next Grand Prix, I'll knock him out of 5th.
Awesome. Okay, so that's pretty cool. So, before we move on, Min, what can you tell us about yourself? I wanted to introduce you as probably one of the most successful Legacy players who's never really had a high-profile finish, but that's not true anymore, right?
It is not, thankfully. So my name is Minhajul Hoq, but most people just call me Min. And I'm known mostly for just playing Miracles. I guess is kind of the what most listeners would know me for. I started playing Legacy in about 2013, late 2012 perhaps. Basically, I went to this local shop that had a lot of proxy events, and I was a poor college student for a while, and eventually I won some events, and they had winner duels back then as well. So I eventually amassed my collection by winning and then trading duels I didn't need for duels I did need, and so on. I quickly fell in love with the Miracles archetype from, in fact, a former guest on the podcast, Philip Schoeniger and Thomas Licek, and their episode that really influenced me kind of to get into that archetype. And since then, I've just been playing a lot of Tundra decks is where I kind of lay my groundwork. But I've expanded my range a fair bit. I've tested other decks out. I've played Storm, I've played Delver, I've played Grixis Control, and so on. But I will almost always just gravitate back towards what I know, and I know Miracles fairly well. Yeah, that's basically me. I guess I'm a 26-year-old software developer, and I've been in Columbus almost my entire life. I moved to the US when I was 2, and so on.
And so on, which also includes, I think you won was it an SCG event? Like,
I didn't win. So there was a team open in Cincinnati earlier this year, and my team and I top 8 at that event. Jake Tilk and Chase Masters were the standard and modern players, and I was the legacy seat. And that was my first really big high profile finish, and that felt really, really, really good.
Pretty sure that's the first of many to come.
I certainly hope so. Yeah.
It's also funny that you mentioned that episode with Philip and Tomasz that we recorded early on, because I often see you referencing that episode quite a lot, and I think you also have it saved locally.
I do, yes.
Is that actually what turned you into one of those really dedicated Miracle players?
It did, I think. I think that episode had a lot to do with it, and then there's a brainstorm show episode that also kind of made me get further on and understand the archetype, because I realized after listening to those two specific things that I really didn't know anything, and I thought that I did, and yeah, it's kind of crazy. And when I first discovered that the episode went missing on the original host for Everyday Eternal, I got really upset. So I messaged Sam Craven on Twitter and asked him to send me the original audio, and he did, and I have it saved locally on multiple servers, so it never gets lost again.
Oh, you're keeping an archive of there's actually a couple of episodes that we're still missing that I've been that I have contacted Sam about to get that back on, and that which we might do in the future. But for now, it's good to know that probably our most listened to and most prestigious, I almost want to say, episodes is preserved on your end.
Yes.
So, guys, you recently came out with your own blog, your own website, which is called minmaxblog.com. Is that correct?
Yeah,
Yep.
So we did. Min is an amazing website designer. He just took control. I just post articles. But yeah, he built a beautiful site here that we post content every Wednesday. It's just kind of a passion project for us. We alternate week to week so that we're both very busy, a lot of stuff going on in our lives, but every 2 weeks we each post our own piece of content, which allows us to really dedicate the time to try to make something good. The idea being something that if we were reading content, we would want to read, or watching, we'd want to watch. And so our goal behind this is kind of creating content that we think people will enjoy, what we want to say, what we want to put out there. And so it's every week, it's something that we feel strongly about, and we put it out there.
And to kind of add on to that, a lot of, you touched on the quality of our content. I think one of the biggest things for me individually was concepts in Magic are difficult for me to ascertain and to kind of digest unless I defend them to myself, if that makes sense. So like the concept of, I guess, patience and how switching roles in a game of Magic can be something that any deck can do, even if you're designed not to do so. It's something that I didn't really fully understand until I wrote about it, or I read Max's writing about kind of that whole concept. And that is kind of a big approach to the way that we write. And it's that we want to make sure that we write things that not only that we want other people to read, but also that we want to make sure that we communicate. These are things that we're learning as well. And I think that there's a kind of a drought of higher level Magic articles and pieces in general that are kind of approaching these deep dives. And I think that we are kind of getting our way into that niche of just having very broad stroked and also very niche based writing pieces.
Yeah, that's something I notice about your articles as well, because when you read other articles, every once in a while you will feel like, well, the author had this article due for the week and they just got something together so they could collect their money. For you guys, it really feels like it's different. Like you do these deep dives you mentioned, and you really try to explore something. Like in a way, that almost feels like an academic approach to me. Like Min mentioned, you're trying to understand something better by writing about it, as opposed to just putting something out there for the sake of it.
Yeah, that's exactly true. So, I definitely have an academic background. I have a master's degree. I did a lot of research for that as well. And as an engineer as well, I write technical documents. And so when I try to create content, I try to make it very rigorous, and I try to really understand, just use the scientific method to explore a concept.
So we wouldn't get any articles like "This is Goblin Matron." It Googles, it tutors for a creature. That's good. So you really explore, like Min mentioned, a concept that wasn't actually intended to be a big part of the show. Maybe we can actually do that in the future. Is the concept of switching roles, which is a highly strategic concept that I think a lot of people who feel like they're hitting a plateau haven't fully embraced and haven't fully understood, and that's such an important skill to master that I think deserves a lot more attention.
Yeah, I definitely agree. One of the biggest things that sometimes people get bogged down to, and I think I've written a little bit about this in general, is looking at a deck list. You shoehorn yourself into doing what you believe the game plan of the deck list is designed to do. You don't think about switching roles or having the ability to go on the aggressive or go on the more controlling side with your mono red deck and so on. Yeah,
so piggybacking off of that, anyone who thinks a blue-white Delver deck is a bad deck really needs to learn about this ability to switch roles. Decks don't win by doing a thing. You win by interacting with your opponent and playing cards that beat their cards, playing a plan that beats their plan. It's not about doing a thing. You don't win a game for having the most cohesive deck. You win a game by having your opponent do something and then you beat them. And if you have cards that beat your opponent and you play those cards at the right times, you'll win. And so that's all that it's about. It doesn't matter if the cards in your deck aren't super synergistic. Say you're playing a Delver to beat combo decks, but playing a Source of Plowshares so you're not dead to a Merit Lage. Cool. if those cards together win you more games than you would lose otherwise, then that's correct.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, actually I don't mean like a lot of people, that sounds almost condescending, but a lot of people who still have a lot of potential to unlock, they are hiding behind certain like black and white heuristics. It's like, okay, you can never play, for example, Swords of Plowshares in a Delver deck because you might as well play Lightning Bolt. But that's just like a minor part of the puzzle, and there's so much going towards it. And basically what I want to say is that the content is here on your website, and by the way, you can send me the check for the advertisement later on. No, seriously, I really believe that, because not only you have an amazing design in your blog, and I think now I'm gonna stop fanboying about your blog because I really enjoy it. And maybe that's actually really the part that Min mentioned, that there's a lack of deep dive, really interesting articles. Because I'm super happy that, for example, say Channel Fireball, or maybe even every once in a while SCG still puts out articles, but I think those are for people who are like more like, oh yeah, Legacy is another format I every once in a while touch upon. But your stuff is really for people who want to get deep into Legacy and understand it. And that's why I'm actually super happy that we guys have you on, because you have a lot of interesting takes on a lot of the War of the Spork cards that we have into the format here. And I think some people have even mentioned that War of the Spork might actually be the most influential set for Legacy ever since Innistrad, which is like quite a big claim. How do you guys feel about that?
I think that's true. I think it's probably second to Innistrad as recent times. Innistrad was 2011, so not that recent. As far as being influential to Legacy, all of these Planeswalkers, as well as a lot of the creatures and spells in the set, are just insanely influential. And when we try to write about the content, we try to avoid just saying what the card does. The card already does that. Like you can read the card to find out what it does. What we try to say is, okay,
read the fucking card.
Yeah, you know what it does. So at that point, it's okay. What does that mean? What can you take away from what that card does? How does it slot into existing decks? What does it mean as far as cards that interact with it? What does it interact with in the format? And what does it potentially break? Like, for instance, the new Karn, which is colorless, is being played everywhere right now.
The great creator.
Yeah, that guy.
Let's shortly mention, because the card is pretty new, so it's 4 colorless for a Planeswalker with 5 loyalty. Its static ability is activated abilities of artifacts your opponent controls can't be activated. The plus ability, actually it's super tiny to read, but basically it animates an artifact and turns it into a creature with power and toughness equal to its converted mana cost. And now the big one, the -2 ability, it lets you basically grab an artifact from your sideboard and put it into your hand. Which, is it no, it's any artifact. Which, as you guys know, the big thing that people were talking about is Mycos Atlantis, which is, I think, a 6 mana artifact that turns everything on the battlefield into artifacts and makes everything in, well, your deck and everywhere else colorless, which is usually less relevant. But the big part is basically it turns off all activated abilities your opponents have, which includes lands, which I think that only like allows them to use stuff like Simian Spirit Guides or Elvish Spirit Guides. I would say like most of the time it wins the game as long as you can protect the card. So Max, what are your thoughts on that card?
So it's even more than you just said. It's cool. You just said that you can -2 to wish for something from your sideboard. You can also -2 to wish for something in exile. So say you're also playing Karn, Scion of Urza, and you +1 your Karn, and you exiled like an Ancient Den or something like that, or someone Swords to Plowshares on your Walking Ballista. You can also -2 to grab those back from exile. Exiling with a silver counter is still an exile. So it's not just your
That's
sideboard.
pretty cool. That's why we have you guys on the show tonight, because I totally missed that.
Yeah, that's really cool. And then secondly, with the Mycos Inflatus, so it turning everything colorless is also relevant when your opponents can't cast spells. Like, they can't tap mana for things. They also can't Force of Will, because they can't exile a blue card. So
the card is insane.
Yeah.
This card is incredible. It's just so powerful.
So how many Mycos Atlantis are you guys stockpiling at home right now?
So I don't actually own... I own 3 Chalices of the Void in paper, because I needed to fill out Steel Stompy from what I was borrowing from Jacob Corey.
But you were having your child?
Yeah, but I don't actually own Chalice decks in paper, so I don't have any of these cards. I do have them on Magic Online, where I have exactly one Mycosynth Lattice, because that's how many I need in a deck.
I actually already own a Mycosynth Lattice, and I have 4 Karns on the way, so...
There you go.
In paper.
So, I'll borrow them from Min.
Yeah, there you go.
And there's a couple of ways people can utilize the card. Like in your most recent blog post, you talked about a couple of different lists, and I also watched... I tried to play today, but I didn't have the time. But I watched Jarvis play the deck last night, and that produced some insane scenarios. And when I say the deck, I'm referring to the current Ugin post version, but there's also a couple other versions. I think you were pretty high on the White Bomberman list. I think you called it one of the best decks in the format right now.
Yeah,
is that correct?
Yeah, I genuinely think Mono White Bomberman is broken right now. Like, actually, I try not to say broken.
Heard it here first, guys.
I try not to say broken too easily. I know that some people are prone to hyperbole, but I actually think this is
So give us some perspective. Looking back at a couple of years, which were the broken decks?
Like Treasure
if
Cruise,
there were any.
Like Treasure Cruise Delver. That's like the level that I feel Bomberman is at.
Whoa. Like Blue-Red Treasure Cruise Delver?
Yes.
Wow. Okay, that's a pretty big claim. Okay, now I actually gotta put the deck together and play it.
Okay, so you have all these cards that work nicely in overlapping game plans. You can literally Bomberman combo with like just Bomberman returning Lion's Eye Diamond, make infinite mana, grab a Walking Ballista, and kill them. You have Chalices, so you can Chalice on one, you get free wins that way. You have turn 1 Monastery Mentors with astounding regularity, where you just play a turn 1 Mentor, you slam a few 0-cost artifacts, and you just overrun them there. You have Karn Scion of Urza, which is pumping out 6/6s or digging you to any other part of your combo with astounding regularity. And you have now Karn the Great Creator, where you can just play it, use your Lion's Eye Diamonds first, then -2 to get huge chunks of mana instantly. So like say you're facing down a wall and you have a Karn and a Lion's Eye Diamond, you play Karn, you crack Lion's Eye Diamond for 3 mana, you grab Ensnaring Bridge, people can no longer attack you, and then the next turn you grab Mycosynth Lattice and you win. So this deck has 5 incredibly powerful game plans that all work nicely together and attack on different axes. And so it's almost impossible to interact with favorably. If someone can beat your Bomberman game plan, you just kill them with 7/7s or Monastery Mentor. If someone can beat you on the creature plan, you make infinite mana and Walking Ballista them. And if you don't quite have the combo, guess what? The new Karn, you put the 4th Lion's Eye Diamond and the 4th Walking Ballista in your sideboard. The new Karn Great Creator can grab you copies of those. So you're no longer looking for 4 copies of each card. With 3 Karns in your deck, you now have an effective 6 copies of each card in your deck. So,
and for the record,
on the receiving end on this last night when I felt like, okay, well, I have my Leyline of the Void, so he's not going to combo me out. Well, guess what? He made like a Monastery Mentor and 3 tokens on the first turn, and that was it for me.
Yeah, and you mentioned Jarvis earlier. Jarvis also played the Bomberman deck and demolished with it. The deck, it looks extremely powerful, and I think I actually agree with Max here on the evaluation of how broken it looks.
So do you guys mind if I call this episode Everyday Eternal 56 the best deck in the format?
I would love that.
You would love that? Maybe that's going to be it.
I think there's a few other decks that are in contention to that now, and I think each of them actually play Karn, and it's kind of terrifying to me. A few days ago, the most recent challenge was won by Eldrazi Post, and by a friend of mine, actually, Michael Coyle, also known as Susurrus MTG. He's famous for kind of discovering the War Prison deck in Modern, and he piloted Eldrazi Post to a challenge win. He put together essentially this first draft of a Planeswalker Post deck, and I think Jarvis played something very, very close to what he came up with a few days ago.
Jarvis actually played a 75 that
Oh, okay.
I independently of Michael Coyle. Like, as you said, it's not that hard to discover this, right?
Right.
You see, hey, a critical mass of colorless planeswalkers. Let's play them.
Yeah, exactly. So a slew of ancient. You have all your soul lands, and you have multiple Ukins, multiple Karns, all of which are powerful and not as mana intensive as they used to be in the past for post decks. So like you don't have to play like Steel Hellkite or Warm Coil Engine and like kind of creature based things. Planeswalkers are way more difficult to get off the table, especially in a format like Legacy. And he's like it's kind of brain dead in that you'll play whatever your hand can play. You know what I mean? It's not particularly difficult to actually play. However, it looks extremely powerful and very difficult to interact with. And that's the part that scares me the most. And I think that a shell like that has a lot of potential to being one of the top decks in the format. And people that are playing in the challenge tomorrow, so May 5th, I strongly believe there's going to be a lot of like post, Eldrazi post, colorless post, Planeswalker post decks that will be represented in that challenge. And I'm very, very scared. as a Miracles pilot myself, you know what I mean? So
bring your back to basics.
Yes, absolutely.
That's what I was going to talk about, because I feel like I look at these different deck lists, and one thing, of course, that they have in common is the so-called Stumpy mana base. But these decks really, especially since like those cards are conveniently at 4 mana, seem to utilize the Ancient Tombs and the City of Traders better than any deck ever before in Legacy, if I want to continue like these superlatives about the deck, because it really, really looks like something cool, especially since like Auriok Cyberchest, that has been a thing in like Legacy and Vintage for longer than people really remember. But now it coming back, like I remember Caleb actually played that deck in like Season 2 and Season 3 of the Legacy Premier League. But it used to be like, you know, like a thing Caleb would do, but not like a thing everybody would do. But now it coming back, I'm really excited for that. But when you already touched on that, like, how do you actually fight those decks? Like, what are the...
You can't really, not efficiently at least.
What are the good and the bad matchups? Like, what do you want to face, and which few matchups would you rather avoid?
So, Max here, I can talk about that a little bit. So Bomberman used to be known as the Chalice deck that loses to other Chalice decks because it's playing all these 0 drops. So as soon as your opponent just drops a Chalice on 0, you can't Bomberman combo them. You can't start cycling your baubles or anything. Guess what the new Karn's Plus ability can do? It can turn a Chalice of the Void that your opponent controls into a 0/0, killing it. So you no longer have that avenue. You no longer just lose to Chalice decks. And so I think that matchup profile change is one of the hugest things that this deck has going for it. And then as well as, even though you're facing down Karn, which null rods you, which is also really dangerous, you have all these creatures that you can just quite easily attack a new Karn pretty quickly. So you can just get the Karn off the table via attacking it, and then use your Karns to kill Chalices. So that matchup profile completely switched. Meanwhile, as far as these decks go, you are a little bit weak to back to basics, but you're not that weak to back to basics. If your opponent's spending 3 mana to cast that, you can probably just kill them.
I think it's a huge deal. And the thing to note is that Karn is the power level of Karn is extremely high, and it's also 4 mana, which is very low compared to what Legacy's baseline is for a card that powerful and that versatile.
And in Chalice decks, Soulland decks, it's 2 mana.
Yes, exactly. Man, that Karn is... People are trying it in, like, Miracles, in Grixis, and in just any deck because it's so versatile, powerful, and it's very compact in what it does. Now, those may not be where it'll ultimately end up actually working out. And I'm of the opinion that I don't think Miracles can sustain something like it, but there's a lot of potential in a shell like Death and Taxes, which already plays quite a few artifacts, or... just decks like that.
Yeah, I can see it working in Death and Taxes for sure. I know that one of my my friends Newton Hang has been trying a few lists with that to pretty decent success. I also know someone else who just 5-0'd with a Birthing Pod deck playing a few Karns, because it doesn't actually matter what else you play as long as you're playing Karn.
Maybe I should really try it in Elves. I've actually been thinking about it.
Yeah, I mean, Elves has mana acceleration. You can ramp out a turn 2 Karn.
Well, turn 2, the thing is, if I get a turn 2 Karn, I'm probably winning anyway. But yeah, I get the idea. I'm just super excited to see that there's some actual things happening in the metagame, because for quite a while, let's not get too deep into like what Legacy used to be like, but I felt like felt somewhat stagnant for a while, but now we're seeing all these awesome new things that are happening, and they're getting me really excited. Like, hell, the other day, like, Anurag mentioned how he almost lost to, like, Sands of Time, which hasn't been really a card in Magic for, like, 25 years at this point. Did you guys know what the card does, if I mentioned it here?
Yeah, I do. So, Sands of Time is a way for colorless decks to beat Back to Basics. Neither player has an untap step, but on your upkeep, you basically flip your tapped cards and untapped cards. Player.
It's a 4-mana enchantment from, I think, Visions, and an enchantment artifact.
I had no idea this card existed.
Yeah, the card is somewhat infamous because a very, very, very long time ago, like in the mid-2000s, right? Even in the mid-90s, somebody played it, I want to say the Pro Tour, or at least like a very high level. And you guys probably know back then, timing rules were horrible, like completely different from what they are now. And somehow that person actually found a way to completely break the card. Like, not even by using a different card, but by applying a different interpretation of rules. And I think I will try to find that on the internet and link it in the show notes because it's super interesting. Because I think it was one of the first cases where, like, there might have even been in-game errata applied to a card because it was so game-breaking. That's
incredible. I had no idea.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah, that's the history of Magic, right? I need to be good for something else, right? So, guys, if you were to play a tournament tomorrow, would you still stick to miracles? Because, I mean, that's your thing. And even though we've seen Anurag try to, like, incorporate, like, basically 5 or 6 or even more planeswalkers into miracles, would you still stick to, like, a standard list or try this out?
I think so. It's weird that you mentioned that because I am deathly terrified of Karn decks right now, and in order to alleviate that, I would probably stick to a stock blue-white list with Back to Basics in the main deck as just in general. And in fact, later on today we'll be recording this, and hopefully it'll be out on Wednesday this week. But Max and I will be playing against one another, and it's possible that I play a Tundra deck in what we do. And I'll let Max kind of give a more of a baseline on what's going on there. But I will probably be playing a stock miracles list at that point with main deck Back to Basics as well. I just think that if people are playing Karn as heavily as as they should be, in my opinion, and they're playing these Ancient Tomb mana bases, then if you want to play miracles, Back to Basics has to be part of what you bring to the table.
So, yeah, as far as a tournament that we're going to play, yeah, Min and I are going to battle each other and record each of our points of view and post them next to each other. So you can, next Wednesday, you'll be able to see this, watching each of our points of view with commentary as we battle best of 5 matches with at least 3 unique decks.
Well, that's super amazing. That's something we should be doing in Magic a lot more. Because, I mean, Max, you've seen that in StarCraft as well. Like, there's sometimes games where even, like, a sponsor or the community puts up a certain amount of prize money and then, like, 2 famous players battle against each other to fight for that. And that's always pretty hype. And I think you guys also have something on the line, at least.
Yeah, we have 20 tickets on the line. Not a huge amount, but enough that we'll try.
Absolutely.
I feel that's actually important to have at least something on the line. Because I honestly believe that when there's nothing on the line, people have a tendency to play a little more loose. Whereas if you actually have to put your money where your mouth is, you will think twice about taking a risky but maybe correct line. And that's also like why people sometimes, and I agree with that, feel that if there's a split in a top 8 and people play it out, it's not as representative of what it might have been as opposed to like playing it out for all the glory and all the money. But yeah, I'm looking forward to that. Where can people find that? I guess on your blog, on your YouTube?
Yeah, so this Wednesday, it'll be today is May 4th, so
May 4th be with you.
May the 4th be with you, yeah. So 5 days from now, May 8th. Yeah. So that will be Min-Max Battles number 1. And so that will be really cool. We'll try to get the videos synced up as well, so hypothetically, you could watch both at once and have them synced up and watch what each of us are doing. And,
yeah, it'll be a good time.
You guys could even like overlay your hand if you both recorded your hand, and you could put into a single video. I mean, at that point, we're getting to what we're doing in the Legacy Premier League, but which is kind of a lot of work. But basically, that's I think what people really want to see because it would be so convenient. But maybe that's something for the future. Like right now, I'm already looking forward to seeing how that's gonna play out.
So one of the things that we'll be able to do is our own completely transparent commentary. Min won't be able to hear what I'm saying, and I won't be able to hear what Min's saying. So each of our recorded videos will have our complete trains of thought of exactly what we're thinking and what we're doing and what we're playing around. Meanwhile, you can check, like if I'm playing around this and I'm like, yeah, well, Min might have this and I'm doing this, and you can just watch what Min has, and he has nothing, and I'm like playing around all this stuff. Like, and so it'll be really interesting, especially where our thought processes differ. When one of us will make like an interesting play, it's like, I wonder why he did that, and then you can check the other video and see why. So,
yeah, because the other person will be explaining exactly what's going on. Yeah,
and then Min already alluded to that. We'll see 4 back to basics in the main deck, something like that. No, I want to somewhat go back to the deck at hand again. The allegedly best deck in the format, which you guys are certainly like making me feel right now. What are some? We mentioned cards that the deck is bad against that. Like, what are some established decks that you really don't want to face? Because looking at your sideboard, the only thing I'm seeing is like 3 Torment Script and 3 Containment Priests, and I guess 3 Swords to Plowshares, which are like cards that you really want. Also 2 Cast Out. So usually a sideboard tells you something about what the deck doesn't want to face. So how do you feel about that?
So I've lost once to Delver, but I've beaten a bunch of Delver decks. The cast outs are interesting. They're really clunky and expensive. They cost 4 when you actually want to cast them. But what you can do on like your penultimate turn before you die is, say you don't have a full combo, but you have LEDs and baubles. You can loop the Lions of Diamond, make a ton of mana, draw 35 cards, but in response to your draw cards on your opponent's upkeep, you crack your Lions of Diamonds again. So you have like 6 mana floating. At which point you can then cast the cast out on your opponent's upkeep with mana up to spare.
Because that has flash.
Exactly. So
that's some super deep tech. How long did it take you to come up with that?
Not long at all. I borrowed it from Eric Burlett, who's he's a good Bomberman player. He's I think top-8'd several of the Quest for Power events, like in a row with Mono White Bomberman. I played him at the Grand Prix Niagara Falls, actually. It was the win-in for day 2. We had some really fun matches, really close matches. So he and I actually, independently with this new card, arrived at an identical main deck 60, and I think like 72 of 75 in common, with 0 communication with each other. And then I posted the article, and he was streaming some, and I was like, whoa, these line up perfectly. And so it's funny how once you kind of realize what cards you need in a deck, it kind of builds itself. And so I really like that, Julian, you say discovered a deck as opposed to invented a deck, because I think that's far more accurate. You realize, like, hey, these cards work, and it builds itself, and you're kind of like bringing it to life.
Yeah, that's a super interesting semantic. I also noticed it when you earlier on mentioned your friend who discovered the Word deck in Modern, because they're actually, it feels like there's a difference. Like, people usually talk about like discovering more like in terms of like standards. Well, apparently there's this deck in there, which usually doesn't happen all that often in Legacy anymore, but it feels like it happened here.
Yeah, I think War of the Spark in general, has a lot of things that are still kind of on the table left to be discovered and fully implemented. You mentioned Anurag trying out different planeswalkers in like blue-white shells, and I still think that whatever the optimal shell for Narset and Teferi are, those are kind of still remaining to be seen.
Yeah, I was referring to Anurag's experimentations even before War of the Spark as basically his like Magic player midlife crisis, because he takes this like super established deck Miracles, and he keeps adding like these allegedly quirky cards to it. Like, I don't know how good his deck lists are. I think he's been somewhat down on a couple of things, like especially the new Teferi, which we will talk about in a minute, which hasn't broken Legacy yet. But one card I want to go back to that I actually lost to yesterday is Lodestone Bauble, which is a 0 mana artifact that's not in the list. I just want to like pick your brain about that. It allows you to sacrifice it for 1 mana, and then you can basically put up to 4 basic land cards from a player's graveyard on top of his or her library in any order, which doesn't matter. But it's also a cantrip for that particular player. So if you do your loop and you produce infinite mana and infinite recursions of artifacts, that's actually a way for you to win on the spot. Because from what I've experienced against the deck is that sometimes it has to pass the turn if it doesn't have like Walking Ballista in hand or Monster Mentor, or is there a way for you to draw cards on your turn? I think
Julian, Lodestone Bauble has the same Bauble clause. It does it on the upkeep.
Yeah, but it kills the opponent on their next upkeep. That's the thing, because unlike other baubles, it makes that particular player draw. So
it's equivalent to Walking Ballista as far as it, with the infinite mana, it becomes a kill right there. So the problem is you want a 60-card deck, you want a cohesive deck, and all the other cards I think are better at this point. Like, I'm only playing 3 Karn Great Creators, which I would play 4 of if I ever restricted to playing 61 cards. And I'd probably play a Lodestone Bauble if 62 cards were the minimum.
Yeah, but I don't know. Overall, I felt like the card probably wasn't needed, and I'd be surprised if you mentioned that it would be like in year potential 65 or something. But it's a card I wanted to bring up for people to be aware of, because that's actually a way that you can lose in a spot, which I didn't expect. Like, I felt I would actually get another turn and be able to kill them, but they managed to deck me right away.
Yeah, so it's like Walking Ballista, as it's an instant kill. It doesn't sacrifice as easily. It costs an extra mana to do it, so it's the worst of the Bauble effects. It's usually Bauble number 9. And so before Karn the Great Creator was part of the deck, you had a few slots to fill, and it was a natural inclusion.
One thing you also have to touch on is how easy does the play on Magic Online, because that's always been an issue with Bomberman, because it requires a lot of clicking. How comfortable do you feel like in that? If somebody were to pick up the deck, would you recommend that, or would you tell them, okay, be prepared to spend like 10 minutes on your final turn? So
that's a great question. A few players will realize you have the win and concede, but the problem is when you have the Bauble loop, it's not actually a win, you just have to draw a bunch of cards. And so I use my StarCraft 2 APM and get clicking.
As a Protoss player, oh come on, 80 APM, easy.
Yeah, all you need is 80 APM for this. But for real, it took me about 6 minutes to make 72 mana, and then, so I had 2 mana left over, and then loop a Bauble to draw 35 cards.
Oh, 6 minutes is pretty fast. I played against somebody else.
That's really fast.
Yeah, that came up, and like you mentioned, they had the Bauble loop, but not the kill, so I actually had to make them play it out because I had a win on my turn. And it actually took them, I think, 12 minutes or something. They might have been not as proficient as you are, but if they have to win 2 games that way, it's going to be hard.
So that's the nice part about this new deck with the new Karn, is you don't actually have to combo them that often. Like, I'd say maybe 20% of my wins are through literal LED Walking Ballista loops. And the other 80% of my wins are just via Monastery Mentor beatdowns or Karn grabbing first an Ensnaring Bridge or a Lion's Eye Diamond or something, and then a Lattice. And, like, that just wins a bunch. Karn, Sign of Urza, beatdowns. There's so many ways to win with this deck that you don't actually have to combo them that often. And a lot of times when you have the combo available to you, you can also, like, say you have Karn the Great Creator in play, you could either make infinite mana and try to draw all these cards, or you could make, like, say 12 mana and grab an Ensnaring Bridge and a Mycosynth Lattice and a Wormcoil Engine and say, okay, cool, you can't win anymore.
And that's pretty much it, right?
Yeah, so you don't have to make 70 mana anymore quite as often.
And when you play it in paper, you can easily just shortcut and win right away. So, like you mentioned, it's not going to come up too often. It will every once in a while come up somewhat often, but overall, that's not something that should stop you from playing the deck. And man, I'm actually getting so turned on by the deck. I want to play it right now. I'm actually going to jump on Magic Online after this and give it a try. And then probably I'd be like super miserable and feel like, oh, I misclicked or something. No.
So something that's cool about this deck is it's hard to play. Like, I notice myself misplaying with it constantly, but it's so powerful and forgiving that it often doesn't matter. So, like,
you know what that reminds me of?
What does it remind you of?
Miracles. Anyway, go on.
I knew you were going to say that too. It reminds me of Countertop Miracles.
Yeah, Countertop Miracles was along those levels of just insanely powerful, and you'd misplay and you'd know you misplay. So, like, with the deck, I have something like a close to 80% win rate with it. And in every match I've lost, I can pinpoint the mistake that caused me to lose. And in every match I've won, I've also made mistakes, but they just didn't cause me to lose. Like, I don't think there has been a single match that the cards, if played optimally, would have lost yet. And, like, even when Jarvis was streaming it, he went 11-1, with his only loss being 2 very clear, like, well-acknowledged punts in 2 games.
I remember when he streamed against Anorak, and Anorak got the Magnificent Lantis down, and Jarvis was like, sweet, here's my car, and the game just ends.
Oh yeah, he also went 8-2 with the Karn Post deck, the Karn Ugin deck.
Yep.
Wait, so he went a combined like 19-3 playing Karn decks?
Yeah.
18-2, right?
Or 11-1 and 8-2. So yeah, 19-3.
Yeah.
Oh, that's pretty wide.
Yeah, it's these are good decks. These are really good decks.
So, is there even a point in talking about the other cards? Because I know that there's a couple of other cards, including one that was prophesized to break Legacy for good, which is not Karn. I'm sorry, Teferi. What's it called? Time
Reveler.
Yeah. How do you guys feel about that card? Because thus far it hasn't really made a big splash. Is it being held down by Karn, or is it really not as great as advertised? And spoiler, I never liked the card in the first place, but...
So, when evaluating the card initially, I actually wrote a piece on it on the blog. It's difficult to kind of evaluate a card on its own. If we were to say that the rest of War of the Spark didn't exist and Teferi entered the format, and we still had Legacy as, you know, the true name Nemesis mid-range mirror match that was starting to kind of what the format was starting to become, Teferi would be way better in that situation than it is now. And now that War of the Spark is released and all of the other walkers have come out as well, Teferi doesn't look so good. In my opinion, I think the card needs to be kind of maximized around in order to actually work, and actually provide the value that you would expect for it to have. And Miracles is where I thought the home was going to be for it initially, but it's just with Karn is so scary that it's kind of forcing those cool new walkers like Narset, Teferi, and so on inside of these blue shells to not be quite as strong, in my opinion at least.
I think the Narset is still pretty good, and I think that's one of the reasons why the Teferi is kind of suffering, is a 3-mana blue planeswalker, and so they're competing for this exact same slot. Meanwhile, so the Narset Parter of Veils, for those who aren't familiar with the new cards, it's a 2 blue, so 3 mana total, 5 loyalty planeswalker with a static ability of each opponent can't draw more than 1 card each turn, so it has the Leovold clause on it. So, I mean, it turns off Monarch, it turns off Brainstorm, it turns off all the stuff that...
You know, I like to imagine somewhere during the game, Narset just walks into the battlefield and Mission Impossible style rips its face mask off and it's like, it's Leovold, bitches, surprise!
It's very close to that card. And to kind of provide context also, I'm going to read the text of Teferi so that our listeners can know what to compare the two. Teferi Time Raveler's 3 mana also. It's 1 blue and a white. And its static ability says that each opponent can only cast spells when they could cast a sorcery. So anything that... You can't do anything at instant speed anymore. It's +1. Says until end of turn, you may cast a sorcery as if it has flash. And then it's -3. It's return up to 1 target artifact, creature, or enchantment to its owner's hand, and then you draw a card. And initially, I thought the card was going to be like pretty good in its applications, and its ability to combo with cantrips and Snapcaster Mages and so on were very powerful. But it doesn't slot so easily into Miracles on its own, and you have to kind of build around it significantly more so than you would otherwise.
Yep, that's accurate for Teferi. And then Narset has only one activated ability. So it's a 5 loyalty planeswalker with a -2 that allows you to look at the top 4 cards of your library, put a non-creature spell, is that correct, into your hand, and the rest on the bottom.
Non-creature, non-land.
Yeah.
Non-creature, non-land, yep.
It reminds me somewhat of, what's the one called that flips into a land?
Search for Azcanta.
Yeah, it somewhat reminds me of Search for Azcanta in that regard. That if you get like 2 activations out of it, then that's already pretty good enough.
Yeah, and it's also nice that it activates immediately to replace itself, right? So your worst case scenario, even if it just gets attacked and killed, is you're still at card parity.
Yeah, that's something is always like super important, especially when you end up in what I feel like we are in right now, which feels like Legacy has gotten a little slower. It's not that much about like Delver used to be, like most Delver decks, especially Grixis Delver decks. I think we're generally considered the king of the format, whatever you want to call that, like rivaled by Miracles or something. But these days, like people play Delver, but I think most people who are not like religious Delver players, they don't feel that good about Delver anymore. And maybe that's part of that is like that the format has slowed down quite a bit. But I can't really put my finger on it. I can't really tell you why that exactly happened, but it just feels like to me. I'm playing a lot more value IFs these days, just because I'm winning so much more with it as opposed to like the traditional combo IFs, which is like at least a turn faster. I'm also having a lot of fun with green-white Maverick, which I'm also doing really well with, which is also like not the super fastest deck in the format. And I don't feel like there's something that's killing me super quickly, that's holding me down. But maybe, now that I think about it, maybe there's actually room for something like that to happen, to really go under everything else. To shortly expand on that thought, I remember when Eldrazi Winter hit us, I told a friend of mine, I think you should really be playing Belgian. I've probably told the story many times, but I felt like there's Eldrazi, which is like fast, but Belcher is even faster, and it usually will actually go under Eldrazi. And he played that, and he went to the finals of Bazaar of Moxen, beating like multiple Eldrazi decks along the way. And I'm just wondering whether there's actually some strategic design space opening up as people start adding like Karns and Narsets and everything to Miracles.
Oh, absolutely. This is kind of a StarCraft strategy leaking over into Magic. But the way to beat someone's strategy is to either be a little slower than them or a lot faster than them. And so if everyone's getting like just kind of trying to little slower each other, at one point you'll hit a critical point where you can all of a sudden just be a lot faster, and the metagame kind of resets.
It's so much fun. It's so funny, and I'm so glad that you're on, because I also often think in Magic strategy in comparison to StarCraft strategy, where that same thing, that principle that you just mentioned, is super, super important, and where it's super healthy for people to sometimes just start. Well, in StarCraft you would call it like 4-pool or 6-pooling, or I'm actually not sure which kind of cheese people play these days, but that's a thing to keep people quote unquote honest, and not go too crazy with their mana or their production in StarCraft. And yeah, I wonder about what we are gonna see. Maybe the return of, well, I'm not sure.
So I don't think Belcher beats the Chalice decks anymore. I think that the Chalice decks themselves, the Empty the Warren strategy hasn't worked against me. I've been playing a bunch of Chalice decks, and I can beat 8 to 10 goblins, or not 10, but I can beat 8 goblins pretty frequently, either just by getting enough blockers and probably throwing something from lifelink, or in Steel Stompy I had 4 Ratchet Bombs in my sideboard. That's kind of a proactive way to beat Back to Basics and True-Name Nemesis, so I would just bring those 4 Ratchet Bombs in, and all of a sudden it doesn't really matter how many goblins you make. If I'm not actually dead on turn 1, then I'm going to win, because I have 4 Chalices, which are super effective, and 4 Thorn of Amethyst, which are, again, super effective. And so the Belcher strategy, I think, works in a particular subset of the metagame, but the overall idea of finding a deck that just kills extremely fast as these people slow each other down is very potent.
One more card I would like to quickly talk about, and that stupid Magic Gatherer is only gonna give me the German name. It's the new Ugin. I think the English name is something Ugin the...
Infallible.
Ineffable.
Or Ineffable, excuse me, yes.
Ineffable, yeah. So, before we
get into... 6-mana Planeswalker. Let me introduce the card first, because I'd be surprised if most people knew what it did. It's a 6-mana Planeswalker. It has 4 loyalty. Your colorless spells that you cast, actually I have to simultaneously translate this because it's all in German. Your colorless spells basically cost 2 mana less. For +1, you can exile the top card of your library and put a 2/2 ghost creature token into play, and also look at that exile card. And when the ghost creature token leaves play, so not even dies, so if it gets terminused, then you get to put that card into your hand from exile. And for -3, you get to destroy a colorless permanent on the battlefield. So
It's a permanent that's one or more colors.
Oh, yeah, you're right. See, I should not look at German cards anymore.
Yeah.
So we saw the card in the list you posted, and that Travis played with in the Ugin Karn post deck list. What's like we mentioned, we're not gonna not only talk about what the card does, but also what the card does for the deck. Like, which kind of role is that card playing for you?
So it's when I play with the card, it oftentimes makes like it's mana equivalent on the turn you cast it. So I've had like 6 mana in play. Like, say I have 2 Cloud Posts in play, and then I play my third land as a Glimmer Post. All of a sudden I have 7 mana. So I tap 6 to play the Ugin. Pay 0 to cast a Grim Monolith. So Grim Monolith is now Black Lotus. Tap Grim Monolith, so I now have 4 mana in play. Play a 2 mana Thought-Knot Seer, and then say play something like I could play 2 2-mana Thought-Knot Seers, or like a Thought-Knot Seer and a Reality Smasher, since I only have 4 mana. 2 Thought-Knot Seers and a Sorcerer's Spyglass for free, and manifest the top card of my library into a 2/2. Like, all of that in one turn with this new Ugin.
I want to do that. Can we do that right now?
On my Twitter, I actually have a clip of me doing that. It's something beautiful.
Oh, we're definitely going to link all your social media stuff later on so people can see that, because that's something I also really want to see. Something that's interesting to me, I saw Jarvis actually win under Mikos Atlantith when his opponent had Karn, because what Ugin allowed him to do was to still cast his Walking Ballistas as 1/1s.
Yes.
And that was actually good enough to take down the opposing Karn and like basically free himself from the lock, which to me is amazing. I mean, it's cute. It's not why the card is in the deck, but it's something to be aware of when you play this deck or against this deck.
Oh yeah, that was such a cool interaction. I was thinking Jarvis is dead, and then someone in Jarvis's chat, I think the Doe is the user's name.
Correct. Yeah, that was him.
She's like, wait, you're not dead. You're not dead. And Jarvis was like, what are you talking about? She was like, okay, you can still cast Ballistas, and since you have a Karn too, you're just kind of at the stalemate. You're going to win.
Yeah, initially it was going to come down to tagging, right? Jarvis was like 1 card deeper into his deck, so he assumed he was going to deck, but yeah, the Walking Ballistas, they actually got in there.
So that's Jarvis was 1 card shallower in the deck, and then Jarvis used the Ugin's Plus ability to manifest the top card of his library, which actually put him 1 card deeper, so he was going to lose the race because he plus Ugin.
So he technically actually killed himself?
He killed himself, but then he unkilled himself.
Unkilled himself.
Yeah.
Okay, that's pretty amazing. So, if you... now, actually, let me put it like this. Do you see something getting banned out of this? I think that's already pretty far into the future, and I think your answer is probably going to be no, because you haven't explored it enough yet. But you were like, this deck is like Treasure Cruise levels busted. What's the over-under on this, like, getting banned? So
far, the matchup I've been afraid of is 4-color Loam.
Everybody's afraid of 4-color Loam. It's so funny. No matter which deck you play, you always feel like, 4-color Loam, I'd play something else. I don't mind. Let me have a different opponent.
Yeah, Gaddock Teague is a pain, Night of the Reliquary is a pain, Chalice on 0 is a pain, Leyland of the Void is a pain, Thalia is kind of a pain. So, like, the deck, 4-color Loam actually has a decent amount of action against the deck, as does Maverick, I think. But the Loam block part of 4-color Loam is also really good, as is Punishing Fire for killing Mentors. So yeah, I think that's probably a challenging matchup. I've only played it once, and I would have won, but I kind of made a misplay. My life total was a little bit low, and so I was flashing in a Containment Priest that I had in response to a Green Suns out of my opponent. And instead of tapping my Ancient Tomb, I sacrificed a Lotus Petal. And then the last turn, I top decked a Karn, and I was Karn, the Great Creator, and I was 1 mana short of Mycos and Thladising.
Wow,
because
dude,
I used
why
my
did I
pedal.
even invite you to the podcast? That's horrible.
So my judgment call of not tapping the Ancient Tomb cost me that match. But yeah, so it's still a close matchup. I don't think anything's going to get banned yet because of the new set Modern Horizons coming out. I think that's hopefully also going to change up Legacy as well as change the Modern format. And so I think it's way too early to see. I think that these Karn decks can get reacted to. Something fun to do if someone tries to Mega Synthetize you and you feel like playing Hurkyl's Recall in your deck is you can float 2 mana, and then Hurkyl's Recall once everything becomes an artifact and bounce their entire board.
Yes.
Oh, dude, I was gonna mention like Nylrod to see the world burn, but Recall, dude. If you pull that off on a stream and you post that highlight, I guarantee you're gonna get like, I don't know, a couple thousand instant views. It's gonna be like it's probably gonna be like front page of /r Magic TCG on Reddit, because that's amazing. That's basically what I want to see. Like these days, I think so much about Magic in terms of like a spectator sport and like have awesome stuff. And that's also why I'm going on a tangent here, but that's also what I like try to do on my stream, like to actually be like more entertaining than educational, which is probably like an easy way to say I'm actually not playing very well. But stuff like that is what I want to see. And if Karn is giving us like stuff like that, even if he's on the receiving end of that, then wow, I really can't wait to see that.
Yeah, so I think that the answers exist. Legacy is a very powerful format, and answers exist to this kind of deck. It's just at this one point, it's attacking on these 5 different axes, and pretty much every deck is weak to a few of those axes.
That's a very potent place to be, and it does all of them really, really well. And you can kind of veer your game plan to what your opponent is doing at all times. And I think that's exactly what you want in a very powerful Magic deck. I think it's way too early to kind of say that anything's going to get banned, though, because the set came out last week on Magic Online, and it's been only legal in paper for 24 hours, essentially. And people will adjust, people will react, people will play with new cards, and then eventually things will settle down, and we'll have a metagame again, and people will figure things out.
That's a completely fair assessment, Min. One thing I will say to tout this deck a little bit more is it's powerful enough that I am willing to do the clicking on MTGO. Like,
okay,
it's good enough that I'm willing to do that.
Any idea what your Magic Online rating is right now?
It's in the high 1800s, but that's because I've been trying other decks too. I post the decks that work.
You're seeing other decks, even though you already got the best deck.
So, I love to tinker. I love to brew. A problem I have with Magic in general is once I think I've constructed the perfect 75 of an archetype, I put it down. I'm like, okay, cool, I've figured this out. On to the next thing. And so I lose interest in decks that way, which is kind of unfortunate because once I feel like I've perfected a deck, I no longer care about it. I want to perfect.
You don't like money?
thing.
You don't like success?
I like the process of discovery. I work a job for money.
Oh man, that's so romantic.
It's funny you mentioned that though, Max, because I think I have the exact opposite approach.
I was gonna say, I feel Min is the complete opposite. Sorry to interrupt you on this.
No, please.
I was gonna bring it up. I asked Min, like, before we started the podcast a couple of days ago, Min, what do you think is like your favorite card that is not playable in Legacy? And usually you get like interesting answers out of people, like, I don't know, like Mana Maze or anything. Like people, like for me, it's always like Defense of the Heart. And Min was like, the card I wish was Legacy playable, but isn't, is hard for me to contemplate, honestly. Because I basically only think about Legacy in terms of, quote-unquote, competitive cards or playable cards, if that makes sense. I guess the cheeky answer is probably Entreat the Angels or Teferi, Fury of Dominaria. And I was like, that was all portent. And to me, that was like such a letdown. And yeah, Min feels like the complete opposite of you in that regard. Like, he really wants to like crush people and come out on top. And yeah, so it probably make for a good duo in that regard.
It's not like that necessarily. It's just more along the lines of my strength isn't necessarily brewing. I like to take something and dive into it and fully understand it before I put anything away. And I guess I'm kind of on a quest that is completely impossible because I'm going to try to fully understand miracles at some point. And that I've been doing that for what year is it now? 2019. So 6 years almost. And I'm not close. And it's a journey that I think there has no real end to it because I discover things that I misunderstood years and years and years ago. And even now, like, I'm learning and kind of understanding a deck list that I've seen for 2 years, and I didn't really fully understand why it was built the way it was, and now I do. And even like those kind of contemplations, I think, are extremely key.
Do you think one day Peter Jackson's gonna put out a movie about your journey of understanding miracles?
Oh, definitely not. It's not remotely that entertaining.
I would watch it. I would watch
Maybe that should
movie.
be a thing on your stream, that you're at the end of the stream, you sit down and you're like, okay, let's contemplate what we learned today.
Well, I would spend more time doing that than actually playing Magic. And I think I do spend more time contemplating what I learned from, like, kind of understanding cards than I actually do playing Magic.
So it's more likely we're actually not going to see a movie, but like a book. Like, how Stephen Menendian wrote about Gush, you're going to write about miracles. But a couple of volumes.
Oh, man. No. That's a little too much even for me, I think.
I can sense you being tempted by it.
I am. It is
Isn't it
tempting
kind of funny that how Miracles actually doesn't have like a central hub, like the Epic Storm, or there's also like greensuncenter.com now for Maverick players. I feel like Miracles is one of the most tight knit, or I don't know, one of those communities that works the most on the deck, and yet it doesn't. I guess we have Miracles chats, but those are more like meme chats these days.
In some cases, yeah. There is like kind of a group of us that work together exclusively on miracles, but it's not crazy in depth or anything. And I think part of the reason why there is no central hub is it kind of requires a lot of time, and everyone involved in that higher level of playing the deck doesn't really have the time to kind of dictate towards that central hub.
So that makes me wonder why there's no Belcher. There should be a Belcher hub. Maybe people get together, hey, I got 5 turn 1 kills today. How did he go? Well, I didn't catch a single league. Okay.
So the problem, it's not really a problem, but it's something that's a little bit tough about Miracles and why there's infinite discussion about it, is it's a deck that's actually correct to taste. I don't think there's a correct Miracle 75. Even in a truly stagnant metagame where nothing will say, hey, nothing in this metagame will change for the next year. I don't think that 2 Miracles play. Like, if Min and Anu both had to go to the same tournament, I don't think that they should be playing the same 75 cards in Miracles. And I think that that's both a blessing and a curse for the deck, because there's only so much discussion you can get out of other people's opinions when the deck is actually correct to how you play it.
That's interesting. How would you say Anorak and Min actually... What's the biggest... difference?
I can kind of I can kind of give more of a concept there, because I like clean cut abilities to win, and I like experimenting to some degree, but I will deep dive heavily on what I believe to be good and just iterate on that over and over and over again. Whereas Anurag likes to kind of mix and match what he does on a regular basis, because he plays way more significantly often than I do. And I think time, is the biggest factor and the biggest difference.
So you're saying Anorak is actually unemployed and should actually get a proper job?
I don't think it's that at all. It's just more along the lines of my time is limited in what I can give towards experimentation, and I know what works for me, and I like decks that kind of have a unified game plan towards one specific instance, and I like having that plan work out well and iterate on that plan over and over. So like, I don't really like the kind of intermittent Miracles game plans of counterbalance with Entreat the Angels and so on, because you're asking for a lot of moving pieces to work. I like clean cut game plans of like, okay, I'm going to play back to basics and counterbalance, and then lock my opponent out of the game, and I'll kill them with a Monastery Mentor. Or I will play a stack of Monastery Mentors and force my opponent to interact with me over and over, and eventually I'll pull ahead with accumulated knowledge.
Monastery Mentor is a great instance of this. Sorry to cut you off.
No, go ahead, please.
But yeah, so some players are going to just intuitively want to wait on casting their Monastery Mentors until they feel like they've got a nice place in the game and they can really leverage the card and make monks and get value. Meanwhile, other players will just like cast a mentor on turn 3 and say, go. Like, hey, can you beat this card? And those are playstyle differences that I don't think are either wrong or right, but should dictate how many mentors you play. How willing are you to throw away a Monastery Mentor? If the answer is pretty willing, you should probably be playing more of them. And they're both correct. They're both they're both right as far as how to actually play miracles and how to design miracles. It just depends what you want to do.
So you're saying there's a perfect list, quote unquote perfect, for a specific player, but basically there's perfect plays and there's perfect deck lists. And if you get like a deck list that's perfect for a specific player, then you might not play it perfectly because of your style to like a worse outcome than had you played a deck list that for that specific player would be imperfect but perfect for you. Okay, we're getting way too deep into this, but
this could be another podcast episode. Yeah.
See, that's what you get when we invite you guys. But that's a super interesting concept, because I think in Magic players there's a lot of desire to always find like the perfect thing, like to really like have Google construct your deck list. And I wonder if you're ever gonna get there. But
I don't think in Legacy you're ever gonna get there. I think it's impossible to, unless you play a deck that is so formulaic and so specific that you have a set in stone 75. And I think even then the play patterns involved, and you just get so. I guess the biggest kind of divide between kind of the earlier concept of like myself and Anurag as a player is he focuses significantly more on the deck list, where I focus significantly more on the actual play. And
man, you're throwing a lot of shades at Anurag.
It's not that at all. He's a way better player than I am.
I know. Well,
I sincerely believe that, and my point is I don't worry too much about my tool, but I want the tool that I use to be very specific, so I don't have to battle against it constantly in thinking and playing. And I consider that mostly because we have Daniel Goschel. I think you may know of him. He's cool Ducat on Magic Online.
We might have had him on the last episode of the podcast.
Yes, exactly. He likes to kind of belittle himself and kind of make decisions based on what he thinks is easier for him to do, and I'm very much in that camp. It's easier for me to play a deck list that does something specific or has the ability to be more like linear, I guess is the kind of the black sheep phrase to pull here. I like those decks because I can play them better and win more with them. And tinkering and iterating on those, it brings enjoyment to me. Whereas other folk like Anurag they're more comfortable with tinkering with deck lists, and because their play is not under their own question, if that makes sense.
It's interesting. I think you guys actually somewhat changed my mind about something today, because in the past, whenever somebody said, well, this is just a question of play styles, whether you play this card or that card, I always, not only subconsciously, but very much thought, okay, that person's just lazy. They don't want to figure it out. This is really just like a lazy person. And I mean, it might actually be a cop-out, and sometimes people might actually be lazy about that. Maybe that's where I'm getting the feeling from. But like on a higher level, especially with the example of Monastery Mentor that Max mentioned early on, because I can so much identify with it. I'm doing sometimes similar thing with IFs where I'm like tapping out for something that's probably not, a lot of people wouldn't tap out that aggressively for it, but I always feel like they either answer it, like with Mentor, right away, but if they don't, I'm going to pull ahead like crazy. And if they end up answering it, maybe I'm actually getting a tempo advantage out of that. And now they have to like keep playing back into me, because I was the first one to actually put something out there that they couldn't handle on my end step. And I think as long as you are aware of what you're doing and why you're doing it in that way, and your reason is like more than just like, well, I have the mana and I have the card, I'm going to cast it, then you're probably like improving as a player. Like to me, one of my biggest steps as a player really was like the realization that I don't have to use my mana every turn all the time, that I don't need to like, oh, I have one blue mana, okay, brainstorm right away. I think that also leads to like so many players playing brainstorm on the first turn for no reason, just because they feel like internally pressured into like utilizing their tempo, but they're sacrificing their card advantage at a very bad like exchange rate tempo wise. And yeah, I just want to get back to that.
The flip side of that also is, though, you have to understand that there's some moments that is absolutely correct to do, and I think even the turn one brainstorm example is underrated, because there are some instances when you need the brainstorm in your hand to resolve, and if your main phase brainstorm on turn one, that means that either A, you have a fast combo kill of some sort, or B, you just needed the brainstorm to resolve. And I think people discount the moments in doing so quite heavily, even though it is technically incorrect, and you probably shouldn't do it very often. But in some cases, if you need your brainstormer to resolve against a deck playing Wasteland or Daze or so on, sometimes it is correct to just do it main phase.
I think there's even a third reason. Sorry, Max, to interrupt you there. The third reason is also that you really want to make sure, for example, that you want to hit your second land drop. Yeah, from
Yep.
Yeah, and that's something that when people do it, that going back to like black and white heuristics, like people say, oh, first of all, you're like on a very basic level. You just cast your cards. Then you get to a better level, and you're like, okay, you don't cast end of turn brainstorm or like main phase brainstorm on the first turn or something. And then you like move on. You leave that behind you, and you're willing to make yourself look a little bit stupid to the people who haven't made that realization yet. And then you can move on and improve as a player because you realize those three aspects that we talked about and can improve on that. And I think a lot of people stop exactly there, like at that exact moment, because they are scared of looking stupid. And for a long time, I've actually been wanting to write an article about that, like how your ego is holding you back as a player. Like, not you, but like in general. And
no, definitely.
Max also wanted to mention something there.
Looking stupid is all upside. Like, the stupider you look to your opponent, the more likely you are to win the game. You don't actually get stupider, they just play worse. Like, looking stupid is a fantastic thing to do. If you can convince your opponent you're bad at Magic, you are so much more likely to win the game than you would otherwise be. It's actually insane. And following the brainstorm thing, brainstorm is very good at changing the texture of your hand. If your hand is filled with things that say draw a card on it, like, some manipulate your library, draw a card, and you need cards with actual text, as Miracles players often do, then sometimes you just got to brainstorm turn one, because you have to change your cards that say draw a card into cards that affect the game. And if that's on turn one, and you just have to do that immediately because you have something like 3 brainstorms in your hand, then do it.
Yeah, a good example would be, like, say you're up against a fast combo deck and they don't kill you on the first turn, and you really want to find, like, your Flusterstorms or counter spells or forces, and you have, like, a couple of cantrips in hand, then you're definitely going to go for that. And, like, who cares if you end up losing and people are going to be like, oh, you misplayed your brainstorm. It's like, no, actually, I didn't, but if you want, I can explain it to you. And, usually people don't want to hear that, but it's really good to talk about that, because I think people should talk about that even more, because it would have helped me as a player quite a lot. I started Legacy in 2006, 7, and I was horrible for like many years. And maybe allegedly I'm not horrible anymore, but at least a little better. But it took me quite a while to make that step, because I was also held back, like, by my ego at a certain point, because I felt like, oh no, this is how the good players do it. But fuck the good players. Like,
it's funny. It's funny you say that too, because in a recent kind of min-max blog post, again, I keep referencing our blog because we've talked about all of these concepts there too. I talk about this in that, and when it came to Miracles, the largest thing that was holding me back was listening to people I idolized. And I very much suffer from kind of idolization of people that I believe to be better than I am at all times. And I hold myself back, because if I don't do what they're doing, then I think I'm playing something incorrect or inefficient and so on. So the moment when I looked at not what the people I believed to be respected telling me what to do, that's when I realized that, wait a second, if I play Blood Moon, if I play Back to Basics, I'm not actually losing anymore, I'm winning. But is it bad to win with those cards? No, it's not. It's something that you have to kind of discover on your own.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good thing to end the podcast on. Like, just play Magic, don't be afraid how you look, because like Max said, looking stupid is all upside.
Absolutely,
Guys,
it is. Yes.
Where can people find you on social media? We already mentioned your blog, minmaxblog.com. How do people get in touch with you? Whether can they watch your streams? How can they send fan mail to you?
So, Min, do you want to plug the other contents for the website, and then your Twitter and stuff, and then I'll do mine?
Yeah, that sounds great. So minmaxblog.com, as you've heard multiple times over and over on this episode. We also have a YouTube channel, so minmax on YouTube as well. We don't really we basically link all of our videos back to our blog site, so that's going to be the main place where you'll find everything. And if you want to email us also, that is possible as well.
You guys still use email?
We do, yeah. At minmaxingblog.com,
okay.
or
Have you
at gmail.com. And then myself you can find at Minhaj on Twitter and Minhajul Hoq on Facebook.
And so all the same stuff for me for the MinMax blog stuff. And then for my Twitter, it's MXG Online. And you can find me on Facebook as Max Gilmore, where that is my name.
Great. If you guys want to find more about Everyday Eternal or my own stream, you can head to itsjulian.com, which is the website where we host this podcast. It also has a lot of my, not so many articles these days because I also don't have a lot of time, but a lot of videos. I try to stream twice a week. If you like the podcast, give us a shout out on iTunes. I really want to thank everybody. I think we've had 11 reviews in like a month or something. That's a lot. And all of you guys gave us 5 stars. So please don't break the combo. But you had a lot of nice things to say about us. And we also have a Patreon now. So if you head to patreon.com/everydayeternal, you can support the show for something like $1, $2, $5, $10 a week. And I want to give a big shout out to Mr. Scott Monroe, who's running the Sway. No, his nickname is Cryo. First of all, I butchered this. No, he's running the Sway esports team. They, I think, is particularly known for Rocket League, but also a lot of other things. And he's our first Grizzlebrand tier subscriber, which will eventually get you a t-shirt of the Everyday Eternal podcast. So, Scott, thanks a lot for your support. Thanks a lot to all our 18 other patrons on Patreon. Maybe I should actually pre-record this and just play it. No, thanks guys. Really, you're really making a big difference because there's hosting fees and also we want to upgrade some of our equipment, and you're really making a difference with regards to that. So you're really making it easier for you to produce the show and bring you this content, and also pay guests like Max and Min. Wait. This is where Min is supposed to say, wait, Max, you're getting paid? No.
Wait, Min, you're not getting paid?
I missed the memo.
So, let us know how you like this episode, and definitely check out minmaxblog.com for more future legacy content, and allegedly, maybe, truly the best deck of the format that we learned about today. Thanks a lot, and see you again next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.